hate my kids. This is Joseph Carter Brown. I am your host, and thank you for joining me for another episode. Today, I have my homeboy, Jose. Jose, introduce yourself.
My name is Jose Zelaya, and I am here right now in Rockville, Maryland.
Good old Rockville. Yeah, and I mean, that's how we know each other, playing football on Sundays.
That's right.
For anybody listening, Jose has the stickiest hands I've ever seen. I think maybe his hygiene is really poor because he's got something on there, because this man has never dropped a football in his life. So I was convinced he was born with one in his hands, but because I can see his hands right now and see there are none in there, I'm going to say that's not true.
Well, you know what? There's also a tale. I was born in DC General, which I think was the last public hospital in DC before it turned private. I think that was a homeless shelter, in all honesty. But
Are you sure you weren't born in a homeless shelter?
It might have been, and maybe the pigeons pooped, because DC's famous for pigeons. Maybe the pigeons pooped on my hands, and
yeah, there you go.
That's it. Now.
That's it. Not to disparage any unhoused people. Much respect to people who are struggling and finding housing, but I got to make fun of a little bit of a dark situation, right?
Absolutely. I was without a home for 4 months. So from 2008. So
that's it. I mean, I've been there before in my life too, man. And it is. We'll get into this conversation, I'm sure, maybe a little bit more. But I feel like the things that we try to shield our kids from and protect them is a lot of times things that we have definitely seen. So I can understand.
But it's good to share, and it's hard, to find the age when to share that, So, I still haven't shared with my kids everything. So, because I'm looking for the age range, because, my daughter's 9. So, and I want them get them all together, but maybe I shouldn't share it. They're all together. Maybe I should do it separately, but I haven't.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the time is you can feel when the time is right. But yeah, we'll talk. We'll definitely jump more into learning about the kids. But yeah, man, it's a Friday in the Washington D.C. area. You got any good plans for this weekend? Weather's seeming nice.
Chocolate City. So I just, what? I know this is out of topic, but I didn't know Casey from Jodeci started out in Baltimore.
Oh yeah.
I had no idea. I just watched it, I think yesterday, and I was like, shout out to Baltimore. Baltimore has so much talent, it's ridiculous. But for today, it was my son Caleb. He is now 12. It was his birthday Thursday, May 15th, which is also my mom's birthday. She's in Dominican Republic.
Oh, nice.
Right now, May 15th. But, we had pizza yesterday, but we're going to go out to eat Saturday night somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so where is there a short list of restaurants that you might go to?
Well, he's such a picky eater. So I asked him, and he said, I don't know. I said, okay, we'll pick something that you like, because all the kids like either chicken nuggets or chicken tenders, right?
Hey, man, I love some chicken tenders.
Yeah, I would enjoy going to Longhorn or something like that. But I don't think they have anything like that. So it probably ended up gonna be like Red Robin or.
Oh man, you can't beat all you can eat fries though.
Yeah, all you can eat fries, and they have limitless drinks in terms of the I forgot what their drinks are called, but they have limitless fries and limitless lemonade drinks. Strawberry lemonade is limitless too, so you cannot beat that.
This episode brought to you by Red Robin.
Yeah.
I just sent them an invoice like, hey, I know you didn't ask for this, but I did it anyway. It's my sign of my proactivity.
Right.
Oh man, there was something that brought to mind. I don't know. I think it might have just been about chicken nuggets, and I'm distracted by that because I had a buddy who used to call me. I have a buddy who used to call me Kids Meal because every time we would go out, I would get chicken tenders.
Yeah, it's like every kid loves it. Like everybody loves chicken nuggets, chicken tenders, and stuff like that. Chicken fingers.
Yeah, I mean, but I also have a bit of a philosophy about it where I say, like, if I go to a restaurant and it's like, obviously if it's a nice restaurant, I'm not going to do this. But if it's like a bar or something like that, chicken tenders are what I use to tell me how much I can trust the restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, so it's like, because if you mess up chicken tenders, I'm like, then I'm not trusting anything else you do, because this should not be hard.
That's right. That's right.
So it's kind of like my way to test a place too,
Yeah, that's right. I like that. Like, all bars need a litmus test, to see, should I come back here or should I not?
Yeah. Well, and I think also too, because it's like every place, I feel like every place, I don't know if you've seen this, every place that has cheesesteaks always has world famous cheesesteaks or somehow like our most famous cheesesteaks. I'm like, not everybody has amazing cheesesteaks.
Right.
Like, come on, man, stop lying to me.
Yeah, we had that here in Gaithersburg, Germantown area, where it was like the most famous, cheesesteaks and XYZ in Montgomery County, Maryland. They all. I'm like, all right.
It's like Montgomery ain't all that. Like, that's not the flex you think it is, my man. Like, you're not saying much.
You're not saying anything.
Yeah, man. Well, that sounds exciting though. So you said it was your mom and your son's birthday?
Yeah.
That's crazy. My my nephew was born on my mom's birthday.
Oh wow.
And I remember the day when he was born, I called my mom and I was like, happy birthday. This is the last time anybody cares about it.
Yeah.
Like, sorry.
Gotta keep it real.
Yeah. So, all right, man. Well, yeah. Speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about your kids. You mentioned a little bit, but yeah, tell me again. You said you have how many kids, and yeah, just give me a little bit of a rundown.
Yeah. So when I got with my wife, Melissa, she
what up, Melissa?
already had representing. She already had a son, Dante. And that for me, that was wonderful, because Dante is, I almost call him not human, because he's just the coolest, awesomest son. And I was like, it couldn't have come from me, and never argued, never, raised his voice. He's just so awesome, otherworldly. His personality and his temperament, everybody loves him. My biological children, Maya, who is 9, Caleb, who just turned 12, and Isaiah, who's 13.
Okay. 13, 12, and 9. That's yeah. So are they close?
Yeah.
They're relationship.
Yeah, they're close. They all went to the same elementary school at one point, Baird Rustin Elementary School. And now, my 2 older sons go to the same middle school, and kind of left behind my daughter at elementary school. So, but yeah, they're still close. But, I think the boys are much more closer, because they're closer in age and they're both boys.
Right.
So, Maya is more lonely per se, because, sometimes they'll play sports together, but, she's smaller and more delicate than the other 2.
Now, do you think that do you think that impacts her personality, in the sense of, is she more maybe competitive, or more like, how does that manifest? Because having 2 older brothers, like, I'm the youngest in my family, and I have older siblings. I have an older sister who I grew up with foremost. And, it was always like trying to either outdo something that she was doing, or, finding that thing. But do you find that with her, in terms of her competitiveness, or where does she try to stand out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would, because I didn't grow up Well, I have a sister, but I didn't meet her because it's from another mother. I didn't meet her till I was, God, I don't even know how old I was. I think I didn't meet her till I was 9 or 10.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, from looking in, I'm assuming she would be more physical and rougher. But I think what affects their personality and her personality the most is whether they were your first kid or their second kid or the third kid. Because with the first kid, you're making mistakes left and right.
Right.
And, I don't, maybe overcorrecting maybe in some cases. And, not trying to be, worse than your parents were with you. But of course,
Right.
technology changes, times change, laws change. So the things maybe our parents did with us, we can't do with them necessarily. But, I always say, Isaiah, he was loved. And then Caleb was more loved. And Maya, the last daughter, was the most loved. And you can see that in their personality. I'll tell you that right now.
Really?
Yeah. But, as they grow up, you just, in terms of, you give love, usually you get love back. But, by the same token, you also have to teach them politeness,
Right.
and what's the right thing to do at a certain time, and what you can and cannot do. Say if you go over a friend's house and things like that. So
you got to do all the prep work.
All the prep work. But yeah, I would assume that she is, rougher, because of the two brothers, or maybe can endure more. I'll say that she could probably endure more than if she had just two older sisters.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And wait, so then you said there's Dante, that's your son, stepson.
Yes.
However you want to define that. But how old is he?
So he was born a day after Isaiah.
Oh, okay.
And so Isaiah was born March 7th, Dante March 8th. And Dante right now he just turned 24 in March.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, and he's in Catonsville. He lives in Catonsville.
Oh,
nice. So they're ages apart. But they were able to live with each other, though. They were able to live with each other, and he was awesome with them. But they didn't, because they were babies, they didn't like play basketball or
right.
That and the third.
Yeah. Did you have any preconceived notion? Like, I don't know when you came into Dante's life. So, do you feel like, I usually ask people like how being a father or a parent differs from, maybe what you imagine. But did you think maybe you had a certain expectation just because you had already had experience, say, with another kid? I don't know how many kids if you grew up with kids, but was it very different, like from one kid to the other? Like, how was your mind changed, like from one to the other?
That's a great question. It's super complicated because I didn't want kids to begin with.
Oh, okay.
But
I don't want kids now. I wanted kids, and then it's like, but a couple years ago, I was like, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I didn't want kids because I didn't want them to go through the things I went through.
Yeah,
and because I barely made it to this age, you know what I mean. So, I was afraid for them in that sense, and that's really the number one reason why I didn't want kids. But I came into Dante's life. He was 9, and yeah, there was really no expectations because I knew how I was, and it's difficult too because my brother and we've never got into a fight, never been in a physical fight, never been in a verbal fight. We've never. So when siblings are like, "Oh, I don't talk to my sister, I don't talk to my brother," we got in a fight. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I don't get, you know what I mean? Like, that's foreign to me. I've never been with a fight with my brother. And so when those things happen, so now I'm looking at Dante, and his siblings came later in his life. I knew Dante was on another level, because he was so calm, so gentle, awesome personality, so cool. I was like, okay, this can't, I don't expect my children to be like this. This is not real. But I just hoped that, because when they're born with a clean slate.
Yeah.
And whatever trauma happens in their life, which is impossible to escape because they're not around you 24/7. You just hope they're able to overcome it. And just treat them, or teach them how to treat people, basically. That was my only really concern, and also with Melissa, how they were going to, treat each other as well.
Yeah.
Because, you do have that sibling rivalry, and you do hear stories. Look, in this house, which is not my favorite, but, I watch sometimes with Melissa, there's like Dateline, 48 Hours, all this
Right.
murder mystery things.
Man,
And
women
a lot of
love that
children,
shit, dude.
yeah,
Like,
a lot
what
of
the
children
fuck,
are
man?
involved. A lot of children are involved. So you're like,
It's
praying at
probably
night.
men's fault. I feel like they're like, we got to figure out how to get away with killing this motherfucker if I need to.
Yeah,
Probably fair. It's probably fair.
Yeah. So that was really my only concern, really.
Yeah. So when it comes to, and you actually alluded to this earlier, where you mentioned Dante being so different, and you're like, this couldn't have come from me. So how are your kids like you, and what, like, even traits do you maybe look at Dante and like, oh shit, I passed that over to him, oh no?
I think I actually was thinking about that this today, from a conversation I had with Caleb yesterday on his birthday. But I think because they see everything you do, I think sometimes, and they have each, like, I think Caleb is, he likes to question a lot of things, which I do too. Very curious, and I believe I was as well, growing up. And Isaiah is very slow when he speaks, and he thinks things through, maybe too much and too little. And I tend to do the same thing sometimes. And with Maya, I don't know if I really, nothing has really formulated in her yet in terms of her personality, that I can see anything from me yet.
Got you.
Because
She's like a Jose sleeper cell.
Yeah.
Couple of years, you're gonna say the wrong thing, and she's just gonna all of a sudden be catching footballs out of thin air like it's nothing. You're like, that nobody even threw a football. How the hell did you catch that?
Yeah. So I mean, but they all have it because they all watch you, and they have your mannerisms and that. But yeah, I was definitely thinking about that, and I was very aggressive, and sometimes I would talk back with my parents a lot. And I see that with some of them as well,
Right.
and we got to catch them real quick, so
how do you learn to deal with that type of thing? Like, because I mean, that can be so stressful with with kids, is that you mentioned whether through laws or other, or just learning, trying not to do things that maybe the way our parents raised us. And you mentioned talking back and stuff like that. How have you learned to kind of like manage that type of stuff? And what's the moment that they talk about that gets you the most, where you're like, you can't even say anything about it because you did it too?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I was super blessed with Melissa, my wife, because she was educated with children in terms of schooling, and she knows the ins and outs. She works at an elementary school, so You know, she knows, you know, everything that has to
Yeah.
do with growing up.
So you had like someone to guide you through it in a way.
100%.
That's awesome.
100%. Yeah, dude. And I think the way I get through it the most, because I don't do what my parents did. I'm a first generation American. So the way they did things was from their country, which
Right.
that's all you can do. That's cultural, you know.
Yeah.
And the way I do it is with patience. You know, I have patience with them. Sometimes I don't, but usually with patience, and I talk to them face to face. You know, I close the door and say, you know, hey, this isn't a good idea, or, you know, you should say it like this instead of that, you know. And I tell them, look, you know, in the morning, we don't wake up and say, hey, you know, who am I going to offend today? You know,
Right.
who am I going to get mad at me today? Nobody wakes up like that, but, you know, things happen in life. Sometimes you take it out on each other, and they're learning life too. Um, and I've been on this earth for 41 years. So all the responsibility falls on me, to teach them the right way and how to communicate and things like that. And they're really good at it, like super respectful. That's one thing I think, you know, my kids are way ahead of me, I think, than I was at their age. And I tell them that too. But also like with my parents, like culturally too, because I thought of something. Um, you know, can
Yeah,
you?
you're cutting it out on
Yeah,
me.
no,
Go ahead.
it's now. Can you hear me now? Can you can
Yeah,
you
I
see my
think so.
can you see my screen?
Your
Can you see my
screen is all
screen?
right. It's a little bit. It's getting better. It's getting better,
Let me
and
see.
I think you're good now.
I don't know if you can
That
see
sound
outside.
that seemed pretty good. Oh dang!
Yeah,
Look
it's
at
an
that.
electrical thunderstorm. It is insane outside right now. You can't even
Wow.
see outside how like it's super bad right now. Yeah, I didn't know if you were hearing all those thunders and like, but yeah,
Nah, I can
if you
hear it.
okay, but what I was saying, because you know, in when they grew up, like you could send a 5-year-old or 6-year-old to go get some cigarettes, right, or go get some
Right,
beers
right.
and come back. You know, here that's not really tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
So I had I think a lot more freedom when I was growing up than they did. So I really leaned a lot on Melissa, um, because she already had Dante, you
Okay.
know, and she was raising him by herself. So she had so much more
Yeah.
experience, not only experience, but then education on it. And so I really leaned a lot on her uh, for that. So, you know, that because I know that I wasn't, because of her, my children aren't being, raised like I was raised, like, my daughter 7 years old, she'll bike across, I'm not, because I used to, like, at 7, and with my brother, we'll bike across the city, by ourselves.
Yeah.
We'll go to the bowling alley, by ourselves,
Yeah.
we would go to Sunny Surplus, get dog chains by ourselves. I was 7 years old.
Yeah. 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 So for you, you feel like it's more important to kind of not so much shield her, but give a bit more of the boundaries, because there's a part of me where I'm like, well, that sounds like it could be fun, but obviously it's a little more uh, loose in some ways than maybe you want to. So is it more that you wanted more of that structure, so you look to model that in a way, or was there? Yeah, yeah, I don't know, because a part of me, I'm like, oh, that
Yeah.
sounds like it would be fun, but I remember being a kid in Baltimore, and it was like I couldn't go anywhere as that age, and so when I did get
Yeah.
that freedom, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. And when I did that, I mean, I'm in just a suburban area, I was born in DC, and I lived in DC for a little bit. And, DC and Baltimore were similar, especially in the 80s. It
Right,
was not
right.
a game. It got popping in broad daylight. You know what I mean? So in DC, that wasn't happening. Once I moved to the suburban areas of Rockville, boom,
Right.
we were let loose. Plus, both of my parents were working, crazy hours. So, we kind of
Yeah, so you had a little less like oversight and things like that. So
that's right. And cultural as well. You can do things in in other parts of the world that you're not going to do here in America.
right.
So,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I said, and I was raised in this educational system here in America.
Right,
So,
okay.
and they teach us, stranger danger, and so
Right.
now when you're taught all these things from elementary, middle school, and high school, you kind of guide your children that way as well. So, both my parents were not raised in this educational system, so it was a bit
right. Yeah, no, I do think that sometimes occasionally I will forget that the world can also be a terrible place. And I had to remind myself a couple of years ago in my neighborhood, we didn't have a ton of trick-or-treaters on Halloween, and I had a bunch of extra candy. And I was like, man, what am I going to do with all this candy? I don't want all this. I don't need it. And I live right next to elementary and a middle school. So I was like, oh, you know what? Just drive to the neighborhood when the kids are leaving school and see if any of them want the candy. And like this voice in my head is like, Joe, no. No. There are weirdos in this world.
Yeah.
Precious that you thought that was an innocent suggestion, but that's not something that you can do. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right.
right. No, that's a great point. That is a great point. There might be other parts of the world where you can do that, but you in America, they teach you that from in kindergarten.
Yeah, well, and I think what you're touching on is an important thing too. Is like I feel like as a parent, as a father, part of my role is to let my kid know what the outside world is gonna be, so that in a safe way. You know what I mean? Like I remember, but I try to do it like, about how you try to not be like your parents. Like I remember my dad, this is the realest shit he used to say to me. He would say some hard stuff and I would hate it. And he'd be like, hey, you better be happy. I'm saying it to you, not some nigger out in the street. They ain't gonna tell you. 100%. They ain't gonna say that shit to you. Yeah. I'm telling you. Yeah. And so I try to keep that same energy with my daughter, where sometimes she don't like what I'm saying. I'm like, hey, not everybody's going to be willing to tell you to your face the stuff. They're going to talk behind your back, or it's going to be the thing that's going to take you, it's going to get you fired from a job and they won't tell you why, or whatever those. And so sometimes you got to teach them those like hard lessons and let them know, like, even though it'd be nice to, I don't know, I guess in a way I feel like, kind of even, you're here now, you're doing well now, and you went through your things and all of that freedom and so forth that you had to also learn to like protect yourself. So now you're like, I don't know, I guess am I interpreting that right? It sounds like, you're just kind of letting them know like, hey, cool, but just know there's limits, or there needs to be things you got to be on the watch out for too.
100%. That brought a thought in my head, which I also explained to them, like when they're being corrected or punished, I tell them, look, we're your parents and we're punishing you with mercy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Once you turn 18, your punishment is out of our hands. Yeah. And there's going to be individuals, in authority, which is their job, and they're not going to have mercy on you.
Yeah, exactly.
I straight up, tell them, as gently as possible that, we're doing this. There's a great proverb that says, the father that disciplines his child loves his child.
Right.
The father, that corrects his child loves his child. So,
when we talk about patterns that we try to break, you said that in the way that for my dad, it was spare the rod, spoil the child.
Right.
So it was like, all right, it didn't always got to be a rod, motherfucker.
It doesn't got to be a rod. No,
words.
It could be words. Yeah, it could be words. It could be electronics now, because, if you were born after 2008, which, 3 of my children were, because of the smartphones came out in, 2007, 2008. So, that's one huge thing.
Yeah, just to make sure I reiterate it, you said taking away the technology only because you had a slight glitch in your audio. So make sure, we catch that part.
Take away technology, which, it's a huge part of everybody's life. That, what we're doing right now. So, and that's a huge thing with them. So, that's one way to discipline them, or, take away whatever they like. You can't go to the park, you can't ride your bike, etc.
Yeah, I just I don't feed my daughter. I'm like, hey, guess what?
There you go.
You didn't get food today.
Hey.
So people say that's neglectful, and like police say that, and I'm like, who are you to tell me DCS?
Right.
Actually, speaking of that, so I feel like we're talking now, and we are in this space where we're able to calmly think about the things we're saying, and we're like, I'm gonna be the most amazing dad, but some of this stuff is just it's still instinctual. So do you have an example of a bad dad moment that when you look at it you go, there was a moment that maybe you can laugh at it now, but sometimes you look back at it and maybe in the moment you cringed at how you responded or how you did it because you realized that say the dad I want to be.
Yeah, there is. So one of my children would not do their homework, and they had maybe like, I don't know how many missing assignments. And so we're like, okay, you're not gonna move from this table until you finish it. And 4 hours later, nothing was done. And then the fifth hour, nothing was done. So I was like, I screamed. I was like, you got to get this done, blah, and the child threw up. Because of anxiety. Or, of maybe he didn't know how to do it, this, that, and the third, or was having trouble trying to put it to, pen to paper. So, I regret that definitely, because I could have done it a more gentle way. And, I'm like, it's just homework as well. It's not like crazy, like life and death, here. So, and I definitely learned from that big time, because, I was like, oh man, he's not built like the other children, or like maybe we were growing up, for whatever reason. And so now you have to, it's almost like also like at work. Now you can speak to certain people a certain way, or when you're coaching, you can speak to people a certain way. You can speak to your kids a certain way, but another kid, you can't speak to them that way as you would another one. They might not learn like that, so you have to come from a different angle and see how they learn better and progress better in what, you're wanting them to do. So that's big time something that I definitely regret doing.
Yeah. And that's such a hard, that's like such a hard thing to figure out, man. Cause like, and I think that's where it's like some of the stuff for me where I'm like, I know that I hope that what I'm doing is the right thing. Like I don't know. I hope so. And then there's times where I know like, oh, that definitely wasn't the right thing to do.
Right. You will find out a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I remember I had something like that where I always struggled with my weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my dad passed away when he was 50, and he never took he part of it was he didn't take great care of his health. And so for me, I was always like, gotta get this shit together, gotta get together, and so like my daughter is a kid, she's learning to take care of her body and do those things. And there was a moment where it wasn't, anything too crazy, but just like she needed to, work on some things or whatever. And like I responded in this like, we got to go to the gym right now. Go to the gym. We're gonna fucking work out. And I'm like in the room, like, we're gonna do high knees, we're gonna do push-ups. And I'm like angry and you're like, pissed because like in a way I'm like trying to like say like, no, you got to take this shit seriously because like it's hard. And but it's great that you have someone like you mentioned, Melissa, being that person who can come back and be like, hey, by the way, because like her mom, and we're not together, but we are still very much family, like we're partners in this. And so afterward, because my daughter, she was upset, and it was like we made it through, and I had to kind of be like, hey, you made it through, you did this, whatever. And her mom, calls me later and like, hey, you didn't need you kind of were a little bit hard on her, like, and sometimes having that person that could kind of come in and be like, hey, by the way, let me just check in, like, I understand. And it was good to have someone who also could say like, hey, tell her like, yeah, this is why daddy was so strong with you in this moment. He wasn't right, and so it's like you learn how to just handle those situations more mature, because I feel like as men, we don't get any of this fucking training,
No, we don't. And I've had to come back to each one of my children in different occasions and apologize.
Yeah.
I had to come back, say, look, I'm sorry I did this, do you forgive me? And I'm sorry, this, that, and the third, So and that's how you learn. I mean, you're either going to feel guilty, or like you said, someone else is going to say, hey, might have been too harsh on them, yada, yada, they're crying or whatever. And you're like, and then you think about it for a day, or maybe that same day or within the hour, then you're like, yep, I should go back and speak to them.
Yeah.
And apologize.
Yeah. Well, and I think that excuse me. I think that it brings up another question. And so the question is, why do you hate your kids, right? And the reason I even asked that question, though, is to that point, right? Because like I can be sensitive, right? And there was a time where it was like I took that very personally, like, or you know what I mean? There was this, because there's a stigma sometimes about being seen as sensitive or anything like that, especially as a man. And so there would be times, speaking of lightning, holy crap, it is going crazy.
Yeah, maybe it's moving from north to south. Yeah.
Holy
yeah.
shit.
We
I just looked outside and it's Armageddon out there. But yeah, like, so sometimes like I found that there's times where with my daughter, I'm trying to like keep her from being like me in certain ways, because I'm like, oh, I didn't want to be seen that way. But then I had to be like, oh wait, there's nothing wrong with her. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. And so like I kind of call that like the thing that it like makes you confront yourself, where you're either like you accept yourself, or it's like, she does certain things when she irks me. She runs her mouth too much, and I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I do that, right? Like I'm doing right now, just rambling on. So but yeah, why? What makes you hate your kids?
Well, for me, like I said, I didn't want to have kids in the first place. But what ended up turning that around is, for me, was, I was such a selfish and self-centered person, which many people will say, maybe who know me, I'm not. And kids, that's one thing. If you're selfish and then you're no longer allowed to be selfish, you're gonna be upset. Right. and my kids ended up changing me in that way. And I I talk to God, and because I want to be other-centered instead of
Right, right.
self-centered. But you have to recognize the faults in yourself as well. And my wife will tell me, and my children will tell me, and I see, yeah, you guys are right. And, my conscience will tell me. So I think just being selfish, in not wanting kids, and then that turnaround where what I wanted to be is unselfish, and my kids help me do that. And it's of course
Right.
it's a lifelong process.
Yeah.
And character building, it's basically character building, and
Yeah.
it's a lifelong process, and I'm still going through that process right now as we speak.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I think that's thanks for sharing that first off, because I think there's a lot to that in the sense that, like, yeah, I think like selfishness, that's one of those things that I've had to learn. I can really relate to that, right? I've had to learn that idea of both. It's a duality of things,
Mhm.
selfishness and unselfishness, because I think like I have had to learn that I am selfish sometimes. I do like what I like. I do want what I want. And that's not bad, right?
Right.
But I think that I was always so focused on not being selfish that I was like trying to be always unselfish.
Right.
And so that part where it's like for the the thing that I notice at times, that when I'm annoyed at my daughter, or when I've been annoyed, it was stuff like that where, like, I remember we played a game once, and my little cousin, who's like my little brother but
Mhm.
also like her big brother, we were playing a game, and she wanted him to stay in the game, so she traded something, and it was like totally she screwed herself in this trade because she wanted him to like survive in the game.
Right.
And so she
Right.
gave up. And I remember being so like kind of upset, like, I can't, like mad. But then like when I look at it, I'm like, dude, that's so fucking silly. Like, in fact, that's a great quality that she wanted to. It's
Right.
a fucking game, dude.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
dude.
so it's like I have to like catch myself in that, where I'm like,
Yeah.
and so it's like I had to learn that there's this balance of like both not wanting to be seen as selfish, to the point that sometimes I was really hiding. Like, sometimes I do want to be selfish.
Right.
And so like I get mad when she's unselfish, because I'm like, no. It's okay to be selfish. But then sometimes, because she's an only kid. And so like you had mentioned something about like having multiple kids, and I was actually gonna joke because you were like, yeah, I have, you make a lot of mistakes with the first one and the second one. And I was like, yeah, I only have one, so I'm just all mistakes all day. But you know what I mean? Like so she can have times where she's fucking selfish, and I'm like, oh, but then I'm like, yeah, you should be so, like, it's such a mind fuck.
It is. It really is, because it's
Can you hear
innate.
that lightning, by the way, on my end?
Yeah. That's the
Nice.
same thing that was happening on my end. It's innate. Selfishness is innate. Like, I don't have to teach my kids to be selfish. I
Mm-hmm.
have to teach my kids to share. I have to teach my kids to, show mercy. I have to teach my kids to be kind. Like, I don't have to
Yeah.
teach them to be selfish. It's innate. And you have a baby, and they'll say, "This is my toy, not yours." It's like, no, it's
Right.
not. You're in their house. Like, it's not your toy. Like, but so I just think it's in all of us. But like, as you say, it's difficult because the definition kind of selfishness within us changes,
Right.
and sometimes you quote unquote have to have it your way sometimes, so the other person doesn't get hurt in certain situations, you know what I mean? So it's almost like a selfishness,
Yeah.
for the sake of the other person.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it my way, because that way is not gonna work.
Yeah. No, tell me more about that. I'm curious to hear more. Like, where have you had those moments with your kids where you all are? It sounds like there's probably those moments where you all are butting heads. It sounds like if the selfishness is innate, then that means that breaking the selfishness is a fucking pain in the ass.
Yeah, it really is. For me, it's a constant battle. It's a constant battle, and I'm conscious of it. But I'll give you an example, and this is the example I give. My kids, wanting to be on their own, right? Maryland, I think it's the age of 8 where you can be home alone for like an hour. That's the law. And then you can't babysit until you're 13. And even in that, you can only babysit for like an hour or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So like they can't go alone somewhere too far or this, that, and the third. And we're, I'm the oldest. I've been on this earth more than you have. I know what's up. I lived in different cities. And we're going to do it my way. And we're not even going to think about doing it your way, And I give this example, like, for example, if I tell my daughter not to play in the street, right? You can play in the backyard, in the front yard. You can play in the park, which is 10 houses down. But say a friend, convinces her to play in the street, right?
Right.
And then she gets hit by a car, right? And then, now at the hospital, she's like, yeah, sorry, daddy, I didn't listen to you. Sorry, I disobeyed your command. And I say, look, sweetie, there's nothing that you can do that I won't forgive you for. But now you have to pay the consequences, which is you're in pain and maybe you're paralyzed for the rest of your life, so, those are things where there's like no debate,
right.
And in that sense, you have to be selfish. Am I restricting your liberty? Absolutely. I look at it as this, for me personally, how, like the 10 commandments, don't steal, don't lie, don't murder, right? Those commandments restricting my liberty? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But they're restricting my liberty because, we're here to love one another. You know what I'm saying? So,
right.
Am I restricting your liberty by telling you doing this, and I'm doing it my way and I'm being selfish like this? Yes, I am restricting your liberty, but it's for you to avoid pain.
I totally hear you. I can't not imagine like, hey, Maya, look. One thing I need you not to do is murder. She's like,
yeah.
Damn it.
Damn,
really? You're fucking constraining me, Dad.
Yeah.
If I need to murder, I need to murder.
Yeah, dude. There's sometimes, sometimes especially with me, having a bad day, I'm like, I just better not step outside today, because if somebody says something to me the wrong way, things are gonna get down, and I'm not thinking of the consequences. But of course,
it explains something. Now I understand why you catch the ball so well, because you're imagining choking somebody. You're like, motherfucker. That's why the ball's always so deflated after the middle of the game.
Why is the ball deflated every time Jose?
Why's it got fingerprints in it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can't talk. It's Friday. I've had
Friday.
Hey. So
absolutely.
It's Friday, and if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh, Joe slurred his words," kiss my ass, because it is Friday. I'm supposed to have scotch. Anyway, this ad brought to you by alcoholism.
Wars.
But no, you mentioned not wanting to have kids, and you kind of started into it a second ago, but I'm curious, how long did it take you to like know, or like fall in love with, like really know, like oh yeah, I got you no matter what? Like, Yeah. When did that hit for you? Did you have a moment where you felt it?
Definitely. And I think it just attributes to, for me, uh my big time, my religion, because you know, from, like, because you know how it goes in the Bible, God gave his only begotten son to the world, that we may put our guilt and shame and embarrassment and our sins, our mistakes upon him.
Yeah.
And he's the substitute for us, right?
Steve Austin 316.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm joking. That
And
was a wrestling
oh,
joke.
give me a hell. I know. I shaved, look. I shaved my head bald for Steve Austin.
Nice.
And I looked like an alien. This was in 10th grade, and I switched high schools, and I was in 10th grade. This was 99, 2000, and I shaved my head because of Steve Austin. I had a hell yeah Austin 316. Oh, give me it. Oh my gosh, dude. You have no idea.
I just took you back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But when God gave his only son for people that are going to torture him and kill him, or people that are not going to love him back or whatever, it gave me a sense when I had children.
Yeah.
It gave me a sense like, dang, am I
That makes sense.
gonna sacrifice my daughter for a rapist? Am I gonna, for a guy who pedophilia? Am I gonna do this and that? So it gave me, it kind of gave me a sense of how much God loves me, and and how much I love my children, that I don't know if I'll be able to do that if I were God.
Yeah. Well, see,
so,
I have to say, it's funny the way we took. We took that in totally two different ways, because you said Jesus was there and was going to be tortured by these people who didn't love him and all these things. It's like, oh, that's basically what it is like having a kid. Like, my daughter tortures me. I'm like pretty sure she doesn't love me. She says I love you when we talk, and she does a really good job of pretending. But I was like, oh, okay. So basically what you're saying is I'm basically like Jesus in that my children hate me and they torture me. I get where the no. Oh, there's so many people who are mad at me for that right now. Like, who will be mad at me for that.
Who cares?
Who cares,
man? Everybody.
But no, I feel you for sure.
Nobody can take it. Yeah, everybody's too sensitive nowadays. But I
told you that I'm very sensitive. Don't talk about being sensitive.
But yeah, that's how that really turned it around for me. Like, I, having a kid, and when they see you, they hug you, whether you have showered in 3 days or not.
Right.
They especially when they're babies, toddlers, and growing up in elementary school, before they try to be who they think they want to be. And yeah, I think that was when they were babies in elementary school, that completely changed for me. And the fact that I was becoming less selfish, slowly but surely. But I even saw that, where, I would spend less time doing what I wanted to do and what they wanted to do, so that's where I started falling in love, and, counted it more as like a privilege, to even raise kids, and a great responsibility as well. Because you want them to be stand-up people, but at times, it's going to be their choice, what they want to do, whether they want to take your advice or not, but they're going to realize it. They're going to realize it.
Right.
I should have listened to Joe,
Right. Well, most people should have listened to me. You've been out on the football field with
especially
me. Most people should have listened to me.
Especially in the football field on Tuesday.
I might not run super fast, but got some good ideas.
Yeah.
No, I think that honestly, I think that's beautifully stated. It started to make me wonder, when you start to think about like your hopes and fears for them moving into the future, because there's so many different things that you start to imagine? What are some of the things that you like hope for or even fear and worry about when it comes to them moving on into adulthood, adolescence, and teenage based on ages?
For me, I think my biggest fear is my mistakes would leave a mark on them to the point where it causes them or influences them to make decisions that are not correct. So I think that's my biggest fear, that I like, oh man, they got that from me, or because I said something or did something, they're going to make a bad decision, or in a huge, there's everybody's going to make a bad decision. I mean, I'm going to make a bad decision tomorrow, but I'm talking about life-changing bad decisions. You know what I mean? So I text my children, they're in school, but everybody has phones. They're not, of course, they're not allowed to turn it on in school. They'll get taken away. But, I text them, I was like, hey, I know people might talk smack. I tell them, don't repay evil with evil, repay evil with good.
Right.
If a person's annoying, talk about or say something, one good quality about them that you think is good or whatever. Cause you know how it is in elementary, middle school. So, I think that's my biggest fear, that they see something in me, or something I said or am doing currently that is going to drive them away from being, respectful and good people,
Yeah, no, I think that's that's I never really thought about it that way in terms of how much of even these conversations are about how much you try to like model yourself, because like you said, your kids see you, they know you in a way that not really anyone knows you, because you have no choice. If you care, if you actually are there, and so forth, you have to expose yourself to them. So then it's almost like in philosophy, the mask and all of those things that you put out there,
right?
Maybe you're not being with your kid, you don't have the mask, you have to be that. So it's one or the other, figure it out.
Right. And I try my best to practice what I preach, but I end up becoming a hypocrite. And I think that's where like the Greek word of actor came about from.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Because actors pretend to be something they're not, for entertainment purposes, though, of course. But and
does that mean that hippopotamuses are pretending to be opotamuses?
It may be. Hey, it may be, because they're swimming in the water. I think they should be on land all the time. They're trying to be fish.
Oh, that was like a take on a really bad yeah. But I'm sorry, you were saying something very serious, and I'm making a joke. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think just kind of like what happened even with your dad, passing away.
Right.
That had an influence on you, and even while he's not here, still influences you. So what our parents show us, what my dad showed me, influenced me for good or for bad. And that's in my head, and I have to battle some of those things. And now I dropping them down to my children, which they might have to battle them when they get teenage years, 20 years old. So it trickles down. You
don't want them battling your demons.
Absolutely. From my dad to me, to my children, and I'm trying to show them a different way,
right?
A different option that they can take.
Right.
I say, hey, if test my words,
do
it one way for another, and then don't do it that way, and see how those 2 months of your life work out. and do it another way and see how
Right,
those 2 months
right.
of your life work out. Test.
Yeah. No, I think that honestly, I think that's a bit of a full circle of that idea of, again, the father's role. You're the protector. And so it's even before that demon exists. So you go and fight it before they have to fight it. They
Right.
might have to, but
Yes.
you want to at least be weakened. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yes.
And
Yes. That's
so,
absolutely. You're absolutely right. They're not going to have to take the full brunt of it because they're not seeing it in me
right,
as
yeah.
much
Or
as
at
I
least they
did.
see you fighting it. They know that you're fighting it in
That
that
was
moment.
perfect. They see me fighting it. Oof. I like that. That's beautiful. That's beautifully put.
Hey, well, I feel like maybe that's the perfect note to wrap up on. It is a Friday night. The
Yeah.
weather's going crazy. There is scotch to be drank and bad decisions to be made, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. So, Jose, I just want to say I appreciate you trusting me on this conversation, having the conversation with me, being willing to have it. You are one of my favorite people to chat with, to compete against. Hopefully not against. Usually on the same team is where I prefer it. But if it's against it, I also enjoy that. And just the way you move through life tells me everything I need to know about how you're raising your kids, and it lets me know that you are one of those people who give a damn, man. So I'm just glad to hear more about your story. I appreciate you and love you, love the conversation, and glad to have you in my life and have you on the show.
Same here, Joe. I love you and I appreciate you. I appreciate you having the courage to bring up this topic and make it into a podcast because, of course, men are laid to the side. I mean, big time. And when it comes to, it wasn't till I think 2016 or maybe 17 when DeMar DeRozan started talking about mental health for the first time in NBA history, and then Kevin Love came out with it. And you just start seeing more and more and more. We have like mental health days off for school
Right.
now here. So I think those are topics that are being brought up. I think, in terms of a podcast, it's really, really good. I don't know, you might be a pioneer in this topic here in the podcast stuff. You know what I mean? So,
I appreciate that.
you know what I mean? So no, yeah, I truly appreciate that. And hopefully, more people would have the boldness to come up and speak about it, because it's only when you speak about it where other people learn from it, and they're like, man, I never thought about it like that. That person has a great point. Let me try that, so I appreciate you for that too, brother.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, man. No, I have nothing else to say. I really do appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording and say thank you again for joining me. Have a great weekend. And
get ready for part 2 coming soon.
Exactly. Thank you so much once again for listening. Please subscribe, follow on whatever podcasting platform you're using. If you have any inquiries or comments, feel free to reach out to me at ihmk@dosomething.design and let me know what you thought about the show. If you have any questions, or just send me spam. I don't know. This has been a DoSomething.design production. All audio edited by me, Joseph Carter Brown. Intro music is Beat 10 by the Open Music Archive. And exit music is The Georgia Stomp by DJ Assault. Both are licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license, available at creativecommons.org/licenses/by-SA/4.0.